there, I'm nicodehaan, and welcome to Living a Primal Lifestyle, where we explore a return to a more balanced and natural wild world.
To recover our natural health and regain our rights and freedoms. I'm Ellen Dehaan.
Yeah, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Hit the like button, hit that, all those buttons.
Yes.
We also post on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Odysee. If you hit the button or hit the link below the show notes, you can maximize your nutrition with the Mother Earth Labs. These are products that we use to supplement our diet, and there's a bunch of products there. You can check that out. And if you have any questions or anything, you can reach me at nicodehaan@me.com. And, we look at mainstream news stories about anti-aging, natural health, history, climate, as well as our freedoms, and we do our own analysis. All topics for today's show are in the show notes listed below in the description. Any questions or comments, reach me at nicodehaan@me.com. So I'm going to start off today. Let me get everything in order here. A little more unusual show than normal, I think. The first article here. Nothing seems to be working.
There you go.
There we go. Okay, so all set here. First article is scientists have bred woolly mice on their journey to bring back the mammoth. We've talked about this a little bit in the past, but now they're taking more steps. So it says here, extinction is typically good. Once a species winks out, it survives only in memory and the fossil record. When it comes to the woolly mammoth, however, that rule has been bent. It's been 4,000 years since the 8-ton, 12-foot elephant-like beast walked the earth, but part of its DNA now operates inside several liters of
Litters.
Pardon me?
Litters.
Several litters
Mhm.
of 4-inch half-ounce mice created by scientists at the Dallas-based Colossal Laboratories and Biosciences.
Now, the mice don't have their characteristic short gray-brown coat, but rather the long, wavy, woolly hair of the mammoth and the extinct beast's accelerated fat metabolism, which helped it survive Earth's last ice age. Both traits are the result of sophisticated gene editing that colossal scientists hope will result in the reappearance of the mammoth itself as early as 2028. And there's a great, the picture is just worth 1,000 words.
Yeah.
Just
Little woolly mice.
These little woolly mice.
Yeah. It says Colossal has been working on restoring the mammoth ever since the company's founding in 2021. The animal's relatively recently extinction, which is just a few thousand years ago, as opposed to the tens of millions of years that the reign of the dinosaurs have been.
Ended.
Yeah, and in fact, it roamed the earth far north. That's the mammoths roamed the earth far north, including in the Arctic Circle. Means that its DNA has been preserved in multiple remains embedded in the permafrost.
For the de-extinction project, Colossal collected the genomes of nearly 60 of those recovered mammoths. The work involves pinpointing the genes responsible for the traits that separate the mammoth from the Asian elephant, its close evolutionary relation, editing an elephant stem cell to express those traits, and introducing the stem cell into an elephant embryo.
Yeah, and the alternative, scientists could edit a newly conceived Asian elephant zygote directly. Either way, the next step would be to implant the resulting embryo into the womb of a modern-day female elephant. And after 22 months, the typical elephant gestation period, an ice age mammoth should, at least theoretically, be born into the computer-aged world.
But speed bumps abound. Imagine that. The business of rewriting the genome takes extensive experimentation with hundreds of embryos to ensure that the key genes are properly edited. The only way to test if they are indeed properly edited is to follow the embryos through gestation and see if a viable mammoth pops out. The nearly 2 years it would take for even a single experimental animal to be born, however, would make that process impractical.
Yeah, what's more, Asian elephants are highly social. highly intelligent, and also endangered, raising the intractable ethical obstacles to experimenting.
Enter the mouse, an animal whose genome lends itself to easy manipulation with CRISPR, the gene editing tool developed in 2012. It's based on natural process bacteria use to defend themselves in the wild. What's more, mice need only 20 days to gestate, making for a quick turnaround from embryo to mouse pup.
Yeah, in the current experiment, researchers identified 7 genes that code for the mammoth's shaggy coat, identifying distinct ones that will make it coarse, curly, and long. They also pinpoint one gene that guides the production of melanin, which gives its coats its distinctive gold color, and another that governs the animal's prodigious lipid metabolism.
Now, relying on CRISPR, they then took both the stem cell and the zygote approach to rewriting the mouse's stem cell to express those traits. And the next steps involved more than a little hit and miss.
Yeah, over the course of 5 rounds of experiments, the colossal scientists, I mean, really huge.
I know, I thought that when I read it yesterday. The colossal scientists
produced nearly 250 embryos. Fewer than half of them developed to larger, more viable 200 to 300 cell embryos, which were then implanted in the womb of around a dozen zygotes. Surrogates, females. Of these, 38 mouse pups were born.
And all of them successfully expressed the gold woolly hair of the mammoth, as well as its accelerated lipid metabolism. And the scientists see the creature they've produced as a critical development.
Yeah, there's plenty of still to accomplish. They said a mammoth is much more than its fur and its fat. And before one can lumber into the 21st century, the scientists will have to engineer dozens of other genes, including those that regulate its
vasculature,
its cold resistance metabolism, and the precise distribution of its fat layers around its body.
Oh, God, I don't even want to picture what this could look like. They would then have to test that work in more mouse models, and only if they succeeded there, try the same technique on an elephant.
Yeah. This comes, the first thing that comes to mind is back in when we were living in Florida, and that hurricane came through the southern Florida Homestead area. And Andrew,
in 1992.
1992. And what happened then, there was a lot of amphibian researchers down there holding a lot of snakes and lizards and everything like that.
Oh, and
a lot of them
escaped. Park Zoo.
Yeah, that was one of them. But there was a lot of privates down there too.
Oh, right.
That's a real, a good area for them to have snakes. And all these boa constrictors and pythons and everything like that.
Well, plus people released them when they
that happened a little bit, but this was the major thing that caused the problem. And even if you just had a few of these escaping into the wild, you can predict,
it's been a disaster.
And of course, the mice might not be that much of a problem, but what happened with the rabbits in Australia.
Right. They brought them in to do what? To control something.
Control the I'm not sure why they actually did that.
But they turn out to be an invasive species, and they
had no natural predators.
Right. So the snakes in the Everglades have now pretty much wiped out the birds and wiped out a lot of the smaller animals, the small deer, the key deer.
It's a real problem.
And the indigenous species, and now we're left with way too many snakes, which are very prolific in their reproduction.
Yeah.
And every year there's a snake hunt out there sanctioned by the government and trying to get rid of some of these snakes. But I mean, if a female snake can produce 32 eggs, what the heck how are you going to make a dent in that population?
Yeah, probably easier with a woolly mammoth if one escaped. It's not going to breed with anything up there, they're thinking, but who knows what happens.
They're saying that the scientists are looking at their work as the first step in developing a more widely applicable de-extinction terminology. And so they're also they want to bring back the dodo
Yeah.
and the thylacine, which is the Tasmanian tiger.
Yeah, and I've heard a couple of stories where researchers actually have spotted the xylosine on Tasmania.
Yeah,
So who knows?
they're
if
very
that's
elusive.
a very elusive
Mhm.
creature.
But I mean, their underlying basis for doing this, they say, is to be able to reinstate species that could become extinct on the planet in the next few by 2050. They say up to 50% of the Earth's species could have been wiped out, and most of them lost to the planet's rapidly changing climate.
also makes me wonder is maybe we were wiped out completely at one time. Maybe
Somebody brought us
and
back.
somebody brought us back. Who knows?
Yeah. Well, it's it keeps reminding me of Michael Crichton's statement in Jurassic Park and the Lost World in his books that he wrote. And just because we can,
Should we?
should we?
Here's another article, killing
A
160.
slightly different aspect of.
It's all related in a sense, I think. Killing 166 million birds hasn't helped poultry farms stop the H5N1. Is there a better way?
Well, we were talking about this for avian bird flu, the egg shortage, the killing massive numbers of just slaughtering chickens and causing a shortage of chickens and eggs, and we started speculating on why is this happening? Why are they doing this? And now we seem to have found an answer.
Well, first of all, they're saying that this was a result of wild birds having the flu
and spreading it
to domestic, which is reasonable to assume that.
Yeah.
The reason I'm thinking, just in my own mind, that wild birds would have things like this. Normally, wild birds that are sick are kind of removed from the flock naturally. The only reason I see an epidemic of wild birds having flus is because of the environment problem.
Well, and the kind of food that's available, people feeding the birds and the
Lots of
grains
things like that.
and that are genetically modified and all kinds of things going on. Yeah.
And the other reason is that we're confining all this poultry into one big area, and they're closed in.
Poultry farms.
Poultry farms too. And then the other thing I was thinking of too, in the natural way, is the ones that survive you want to keep. So why would you be culling?
Well, if they're naturally immune, you want to
keep those. And here the stories mostly say is, okay, we found 5 birds in 100,000. Let's kill 100,000.
Yeah, get rid of all.
I hope they never think that about people.
Jeez. Well, it's a miracle because there's plenty of bad apples among the human race.
Well, yeah, but you want to kill the bad apples, but not the good apples.
That's what I mean.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what I mean.
Okay,
so it says when the deadly H5N1 bird flu virus made its first appearance at a U.S. poultry farm, it was February of 2022. And at that time, roughly 29,000 turkeys at an Indiana facility were sacrificed in an attempt to avert a larger outbreak.
Yeah, it didn't work. 3 years later, highly pathogenic avian influenza, or HPAI, has spread to all 50 states. The number of commercial birds that have died or have been killed exceeds 166 million, and the price of eggs are at an all-time high.
Poultry producers, infectious disease experts, and government officials now concede that H5N1 is probably here to stay. And that recognition is prompting some of them to question whether the longstanding practice of culling every single bird on an infected farm is sustainable over the long term.
Instead, they're discussing such strategies as targeted depopulation, vaccinations, and even relocation of wetlands and bodies of water to lure virus-carrying wild birds away from the poultry farms.
But each of these alternatives entails a variety of logistical, economic, and environmental costs that may eclipse the intended savings.
Yeah, people talk about common sense solutions to bird flu. One of the authors says he's
a veterinarian and a commercial poultry expert at UC Davis.
But what but that's what mass culling is. There's a reason we've been doing it. It's common sense. Is it really?
Yeah, right. The current version of the bird flu, known as, are you ready for this, folks? H5N1 2.3.4.4b is highly contagious and highly lethal. It has plowed through the nation's commercial chickens, turkeys, and ducks with a mortality rate of nearly 100%.
There's a reason why they call it the
Highly pathogenic.
Yeah. So down a little bit further, there's an author here, the dean of the Brown University School of Public Health.
And here's a quote from him.
One of the reasons to cull early is that you don't want a lot of birds with human exposures. There's more infections. The more infections we introduce to humans, the more mutations we're going to see.
That increase the risk for a broader epidemic or pandemic.
Yeah.
So it says here.
Yeah, the U.S. Department of Agriculture reimburses farmers for eggs and birds that have been killed to contain an outbreak, but not for the birds that die of the flu.
Well, that certainly is an incentive to kill
the birds. Yeah,
Sure.
then you don't have to let them grow. And I've killed 1 million birds. Please give me the money.
Yeah, well, it says here that this has meant killing more than 4.2 million birds, most of which may have been healthy.
Yeah, doesn't seem like a good strategy to me.
No.
So Bill Matos is the president of the California Poultry Federation, said a more targeted approach could be feasible when all birds are not living under the same roof.
So they're suggesting that they have small separate smaller groups of birds in different buildings, and so they say that biosecurity measures can help keep pathogens from spreading between barns, and they're saying this would entail the workers changing their clothes and their boots as soon as they leave the one barn to go to the next barn, or by assigning workers to a single barn. But
one of my thoughts is, why are they keeping birds in a barn? Why not an aviary?
Yeah, well, the answer is because
the less confined space, the easier it is for the birds not to be sick. The more you can
and that's true of people too.
Well, right.
And
we saw what happened with the pandemic. They wanted to keep people inside. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah, well, none of it made sense. So
that's true.
That's a different conversation. All right, so there's a veterinarian and former USDA researcher. He says he doesn't see that. His name is Dr. John Korsland. And he says he doesn't think that practice of separating and changing clothes and everything else could work because of the virulence of H5N1.
Yeah, he says that chickens are infected and shed viruses very early, often before visible evidence of clinical illness.
So their period of contagion is well before the symptoms start.
Yeah, odds are that the healthy buildings on infected premises may be in reality in the early stages of incubating infections.
And it goes on. I mean, it says the flu particles from one facility can escape exhaust fans and travel great distances. And this was from the Center for Infectious Disease Research and Policy at the University of Minnesota. And it has to do with wind direction and the speed of the wind. Now here we get to bird flu vaccines may offer some protection. China and France use them, and the USDA granted a conditional license this month for an H5N2 vaccine designed for chickens. And we're going to get to that in a minute in another article. And we apparently we export more than 6.7 billion pounds of chicken meat, second only to Brazil. So the foreign buyers don't want vaccinated meat. And it says most U.S. trade partners are not keen to import poultry products from countries that vaccinate their birds due to the concerns that the shots could mask the presence of the virus.
Yeah, maybe it doesn't prevent it, like some other
ones that we could mention, right?
And most will blackball a nation's entire poultry portfolio, even if just one region or type of poultry is infected.
Yeah, so I'll go down to the next one.
So the U.S. exports,
Yeah, okay. Wildlife and agriculture officials should ramp up their testing of wild birds to determine where the virus is moving and how it's evolving, said the researcher.
Yeah, that will require global coordination because infected birds can travel back and forth between the United States, Canada, Russia, East Asia, and Europe.
Yeah, poultry. Now this was interesting to me. I hadn't thought about it. Poultry farms near ponds, lagoons, or wetlands that attract wild birds should be on high alert during migration season. And farmers should use apps such as eBird, Birdcast, or the Waterfowl Alert Network to keep tabs on when the birds are nearby so they can step up their biosecurity measures as needed. It may be possible to lure wild birds away from agricultural facilities by bolstering the wetlands.
Yeah.
And then there's more about that in the next article.
Yeah, it's interesting because all these little ponds and stuff like that are great habitats for the runoff from agriculture.
Mm-hmm.
So we're talking about the chemicals that are used in agriculture. So
Fertilizers
and
weed
insecticides,
killers, right?
weed killers, and then we have the things that actually are used in mass now with soybeans and corn, where they're using, a broad spray that doesn't kill the host because the host has already been manipulated through a gene splicing to protect it from those chemicals, but the rest of the environment gets overloaded with this because of the broad spraying of it. And I think this is the stuff that we have to clean up if we want to be healthy, not only our animals and birds, but us too.
And it's not enough to try I think that's one of the points here. It's not enough you really, when you're sourcing your food, it may not help to get free range chickens and so on if they are adjacent to any kind of chicken factories or wild bird sanctuaries where the wind carries the flu.
Yeah. And then what happens when these birds escape through a disaster or something like that? We have the same things that happens with the snakes. Right. The other thing is they seem to be applying the same sense, and it's not common sense, to these animals as they do to us. Treat the symptoms, not the cause. Let's go to the next article, and it is named Vaccinating Poultry Against Avian Flu is Contributing to the Spread. And this comes from BMJ.com, the British Medical Journal. Okay, so inappropriate use of vaccination in poultry to try to prevent the spread of bird flu has become part of the problem, has serious human health implications, official of the World Health Association warned this week.
Who? Aptly named.
Who is that? Yes.
Vaccination can sometimes cause silent transmission of infection from asymptomatic birds, in other words, birds that are not showing any symptoms. Mass vaccination programs entail people tramping around the countryside from farm to farm, and they can spread the disease as they go. And the first response must be culling, says the WHO spokesman. No vaccine has yet been approved for use in humans, but birds have been vaccinated against the disease for about 4 years.
Yeah, the Chinese government has said that it intends to vaccinate all its 4 billion chickens. The Indonesian government has said that it does not have the resources to control the outbreak by culling because it could not afford to compensate the farmers.
Well, Chinese announcement of mass vaccination of birds came in the same week that the Chinese Ministry of Health confirmed the country's first 2 human cases of H5N1 avian flu, one of them fatal. And, it's just
2 new confirmed cases, both fatal, have been reported in Indonesia. A 20-year-old woman and a 16-year-old girl died early in November. And the country's death toll to 7 is of the 11 confirmed cases, I guess.
Yeah, so well, I mean, considering the millions of people that we have in our populations,
it's not a large
it's not very many people getting.
Yeah, that's not downplaying it, but that's the truth too. It's the same thing that, read the article the other day. You got 200,000 birds and 30 of them are sick. Let's kill the whole thing. It doesn't really make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And if we're cooking the birds and eating them that way, you're not going to get the disease anyway.
If the cooking kills the virus. right?
Well, afterwards, I would think so. I mean, it's the thing is, I would think you want the birds who survive to
Procreate.
propagate. Exactly.
Procreate.
Yeah, that just makes sense.
Hmm. Well, it's interesting because China's announcement that they're vaccinating all their chickens triggered a heightened state of alert in neighboring Hong Kong, which has reintroduced temperature checks on all travelers at border points into the city, that was they were instituted originally during the 2003 outbreak of SARS.
Yeah.
And it becomes a question of, are we taking a sledgehammer to a nail? Are we overreacting?
Also selling vaccines, I would think.
Well, the vaccines for the chickens, for sure.
Yeah.
That's a lot of vaccines for the chickens.
Now, if it becomes a law that you have to vaccinate your chickens, that becomes a boom for that.
Well, let's go to the next article.
Okay, let's do that.
As the bird flu outbreak worsens, Zoetis gets green light for poultry vaccine.
Yeah,
and so we're sitting here going, oh, that explains it.
Maybe so. I don't know. The United States Department of Agriculture has granted conditional approval for a new bird flu vaccine for poultry.
So now, let's see. This new avian flu vaccine, developed by New Jersey-based Zoetis, was approved last week after meeting safety and efficacy standards. So in other words, they said it was effective and it was safe.
And it
says here.
Since 2022, the virus has affected more than 150 million birds, including 20.5 million in the last 30 days alone.
The U.S. has traditionally handled bird flu outbreaks by slaughtering or culling infected flocks rather than vaccinating.
But the virus spreads to other animals, including cattle, even humans. Officials are considering new containment strategies.
National Economic Council Director Kevin Hassett said Sunday that the Trump administration is finalizing a plan to combat bird flu without mass culling, as this at CNN report.
So far, 68 bird flu infections have been confirmed in people in the United States since March of 2024.
So it's in a whole year.
Yeah, and one fatal case.
One fatal case earlier this year. So, one fatal case in a period of a year.
So the U.S. Center of Disease Control and Prevention maintains that the threat to the general public is low, though farm workers and backyard poultry owners are at the higher risk. Yeah. Right, so that's the news, folks.
the news on why you can't get eggs at your grocery store.
Yeah, we've had a tough time. Well, luckily we've been kind of ahead of the curve with this.
Yeah, well, we get our eggs. They are organic and they're from the local chicken farms where the chickens run around.
Yeah, and there's been a couple of weeks where we haven't been able to get eggs, but we've had enough on hand.
Yeah, we try and stay about a dozen or so ahead of the game so that
But the eggs are delicious now, I'm telling you.
Yeah, they really are.
Yeah.
Not only that, but I've noticed that when it says large eggs on the box, they're actually large eggs. Instead of me picking around saying, well, which ones are large and which ones are medium, and let me combine them, and All right, so there was one last article here that we have that is again along the lines of what are we doing to the poor natural wildlife environment?
Yeah, and of course we're the salmon that they're farming.
Yeah, so
we've always maintained that the nutrition of the farm fish is way, way below the wild fish, especially in omega-3.
Oh, well, they feed them grains. I mean, things fish don't eat.
Yeah, they don't eat unless they're stressed, and there's the only thing to eat.
Yeah, but in the wild, there's not going to be any grains.
Yeah, and what I'm thinking of is that's kind of what's happening to us, isn't it? I mean, the government, the food companies are pushing a certain type of food to us that,
and if they don't give us anything else,
well, also is the indoctrination that if you want to be healthy, you need a plant-based diet and all these things. And yeah, I think you could subsist on it.
Well, here's a question: is that the conspiracy theorists are saying that there's all kinds of conspiracies regarding the food and controlling the food of the population, and then if they're pushing the plant-based diets, is that another attempt to cull the population by making them sicker or getting rid of them altogether? Well, so here we have, there's a very large fish farm in Norway. There are all kinds of fish farms around, but in this case, 27,000 farm salmon escaped from this fish farm in Norway.
Yeah, Norway salmon farm has received the scorn of local conservationists, quick to label the mass escape of some 27,000 fish a disaster for wild salmon, as its owner, Maui,
that's a global seafood company,
has offered fishers a bounty of
36 pounds.
No, 36 euros, I believe it is, for every one of these escapees they catch. So why is it important to catch these things?
The escape is the result of a cage failure at Maui's Storvika 5 facility in Troms, in the northwest of Norway. According to reports, it was one of the fish cage's moorings that broke, causing part of the fish pen to sink and releasing 27,000 approximately farmed salmon into the waters surrounding it.
That number is believed to be around 1/4 of the 105,000 salmon currently farmed on the site.
And the escape occurred on Friday, February 9th. And the following Monday, there was a press statement that said that should not have happened and it was very regrettable. And
stuff happens, though.
Yeah, well, you know.
Noting the immense pressures that wild salmon are already facing in waters around Norway, conservationists have been quick to chastise the salmon farm, calling it an event a disaster for wild salmon.
The escape does indeed raise some serious environmental concerns. Research has shown that among the risks farmed salmon pose to their wild counterparts is that interbreeding can and often does occur, and in these circumstances, it alters the genetic makeup of the wild salmon population, introduces new disease such as infections from sea lice and other dangers that could wipe out the wild populations.
I'm sure they'll come up with a virus for that. A vaccine for that, yeah.
Not a virus.
No, that's right.
Yeah. Maui has now emptied the affected cages, working with local partners and authorities to contain the impact after Norwegian authorities ordered them to expand their efforts. Now, previously, they have turned to, well, it says in an unprecedented move, they've turned to local fishing.
For assistance to get these.
And they offered the reward is 500 kroner, which is the Norwegian.
And then it's not like you can corral them like you do on land.
For each one.
And how do you identify them in the ocean?
Well, I think they can tell they're much bigger and they have a different coloration.
Well, yeah, but I mean, you're catching wild ones and
yeah. Oh, well, there you go. It says they're offering a per fish reward, and once caught, the fish can be delivered to fish reception centers where you can collect your bounty. So it says Norway exports around 1.2 million tons of farmed salmon every year. And the wild salmon numbers have dropped to a historic low last summer, so that 33 rivers had to be closed to salmon fishing. And this summer, the authorities have suggested 42 rivers and 3 fjords are going to be closed to protect the wild salmon.
Yeah, science has proved that interbreeding between wild stocks and farmed salmon produce offspring that in the long term have low survival rates in nature.
I mean, this is the kind of, it's one thing when Fukushima collapsed and the radiation poured out and they were trying to contain everything and it poisoned everything in the area and whatever. And so you think, oh, well, it's not that big a deal if the wild salmon get out. I mean, if the farm salmon get out. But it turns out it has a dramatic and drastic negative impact on the wild population.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, once we start fooling with nature we get smacked.
We have lots of movies about that, don't we? Jurassic Park kind of things.
Lots of things. Yeah.
But yeah, this is, I think the effort should be, we're pouring a lot of money into these things with the vaccines, with the culling, with these bounties and all the things that we're doing.
Paying the farmers. Yeah. I mean, where's that money come from?
Yeah. And also we know that a lot of the food companies are being subsidized, at least in America, these large food companies that are making really bad food, according to our standards, are being subsidized.
Well, some of their crops are.
Yeah, the crops.
Mhm.
Yeah, so they're being paid.
Right.
You know.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I don't know what's going on at the moment in that terms. I remember years ago when farmers are being paid not to grow crops,
yeah,
so that the corn, so there'd be a scarcity and the price could go up.
yeah. There's lots of things like that
Oh,
going on.
goodness.
I think the effort should be in cleaning up our environment so these viruses don't get into these populations, and that's a better long-term solution. We're looking at very short-term goals here with
Yeah,
these things. The same thing that's happening in our health care system with humans.
Yeah, and
So
really,
this
when
is really a
when
parallel.
you think about it, the why would a wild bird get the flu? Unless there's something very wrong in the
It
environment.
has to do with the domestication of our wild lands. And
Draining. I look at Florida. So much of half of Florida, really
drained,
half
yeah.
was Everglades.
Yeah.
And it was drained into those intracoastal waterways. And now we just have the Everglades section down in the kind of the southern tip of
And we have all these wild bloomings of different algae,
algae.
not
Mhm.
only in the lakes and everything like that, but also in the ocean, especially the West Coast,
Right.
but also the East Coast.
Yeah, yeah.
We've seen that every year.
Red tide.
The red tide, yeah.
Mhm.
And these are a result of the contamination of the environment.
Well,
It all has to do with that.
it's like Lake Okeechobee blooms because of all the fertilizer and the runoff that goes in there feeds the bloom.
Right.
So it's pretty
So
crazy.
I think we have it backwards, and I think this
Treating the
is it going to
symptoms.
be addressed, or is nature going to make its own decision and kind of fight back, like we've seen in a lot of those movies and things like that?
Mhm.
Who knows what's going to happen? But we
Just be aware, folks.
Well, I think it's more important than ever to support your small farmer, the person, go to your farmer,
your
see how they're
local
doing
source.
things. Yeah, your local sources, and yeah, I think you'll be a lot healthier. And we talk about that on all our shows. So this is a little off the normal topic, but it really is boiling down to the same thing.
Yeah, it all
Keep-
comes down to the food and the environment
Yep.
and the poisons, the toxins, and the impacts of combining things that were never meant to be combined.
Domesticating our wildlife. Well, that's the show for today. I hope you enjoyed that, and we'll be back next week probably. And
We'll be here.
yeah,
I don't know if we'll be here.
That's right. We'll be around, but whether there's a show or not, sometimes it's up in the air.
But anyway, be well.
Yeah,
Take
thanks for
care.
sticking around. Bye bye now.